On New Year's Day, I discovered evidence suggesting my wife may be involved in an emotional or physical affair. It's been a difficult few weeks, impacting my daily life. I haven't confronted her yet and need more evidence to protect my interests in our shared assets due to the lack of a prenuptial agreement. Here's some background. I'm in my mid-40s, she's in her late 30s, and we got married in 2021. Before meeting her, I focused on my successful personal business. However, our relationship started strong but changed after our honeymoon. Her behavior in the bedroom shifted, and she used sexual intimacy as a form of punishment, which was a significant aspect of our relationship. Around late March to early April, a few months into our marriage, I discussed our reduced sexual activity and the unhealthy use of intimacy as a punishment with my wife. Unfortunately, this led to major arguments and a 2-month period without sex. Although we patched things up to some extent, the frequency of our intimacy continued to decline steadily, from twice a week in May-June to once a week in the summer, and only a few times since October. The person involved in this situation with my wife is her boss, whom I found exchanging messages with her in a shared Word document. Their conversations contain highly sexual language, although they don't explicitly discuss physical encounters. This seems to have been going on since shortly after our marriage. I'm torn between gathering more proof or confronting my wife while feeling a mix of emotions like sadness, loneliness, self-disgust, humiliation, shock, and anger. Part of me wants to salvage our relationship, but another part considers ending it and moving forward alone. If there hasn't been a physical affair, I'd be more inclined to work things out, but I'm overwhelmed with sadness and uncertainty. Writing this has taken me several days. Hello everyone, I appreciate your responses, they've been genuinely helpful. This morning, I talked to a lawyer friend who, while not a family lawyer, mentioned that Canada follows a no-fault approach when it comes to infidelity. Bigger, your maple syrup analogy for asset division was both amusing and on point, giving me some relief. I have an appointment with a family lawyer next Thursday to fully understand my rights and risks. To address other questions, SRC, you bring up a valid point about potential fraud, which has crossed my mind as well. It makes me wonder how premeditated all of this might be, which is painful. Buster, your insight about workplace affairs and secret encounters hit me hard. They both work at a hotel, with him in a high position and her not. Until now, I've been grappling with the emotional affair aspect, but now I'm concerned about how easily it could escalate to a physical affair, given their work environment. I don't have a detailed understanding of hotel work, but the thought that they could easily find places for such activities is heart-wrenching. Her backstory includes being cheated on by her ex-husband, just the tip of the iceberg in a toxic relationship. Ironically, they get along better now than during their marriage, which is at least better for their boys. I don't have reason to believe this is a pattern for her or anything like it has happened before. But, as others have pointed out, for her to engage in an affair so early suggests that I meant nothing to her. I can't easily accept that as true though, and I'm struggling to understand how things have deteriorated so rapidly. As for the other man, her boss, he's recently remarried, in his mid-50s, and his new wife is in her late 30s. They had a child around the same time my wife and I got married. I've met his wife a few times at social events hosted at their place. She's not just a trophy wife, she's beautiful, has a great job, and seems level-headed. Despite their age gap, they appear to be a seemingly perfect couple. The worst part about waiting to confront this situation is that the present feels like a charade. We're going on a ski vacation with friends this weekend, and the idea of playing the role of a loving husband while knowing our relationship is about to face a major crisis makes me physically ill. I've lost a significant amount of weight, and even my wife noticed it recently, though she expressed concern. I keep swinging between extreme emotions. This situation is incredibly tough. Hello, everyone. It was a dreadful weekend, and I must find a solution quickly because I'm not skilled at pretending, and reality is breaking through the facade. 2 significant events from the weekend stand out. On Saturday, my wife was engrossed in her phone throughout dinner, and I couldn't see who she was talking to. Her excessive phone use prompted some friends to jokingly comment on her attachment to it. Later, during drinks after dinner, I did something unusual. I pretended to be engrossed in my phone to see how she'd react. This upset her, and she left the gathering in frustration. However, that night, she attempted to initiate intimacy with me, but I resisted. She went to bed upset. By the way, if she were having a physical affair, would she genuinely want to be intimate with me at the same time? The following day, she barely spoke to me, which was okay with me. It wasn't until we drove home together that we talked. What happened shocked me. She asked me if I had been unfaithful. I was left speechless. I asked her what led to this unbelievable question, and she explained, "You've been distant lately, less interested in sex, always on your phone. Is there someone else?" I struggled to control my emotions. After a moment of silence, during which her demeanor shifted from defiance to uncertainty to discomfort, I replied, "No, I haven't been unfaithful, and I never would be." If I had issues with our relationship, I'd address them openly, not through cheating. People who cheat are deceitful and manipulative. She then backtracked, saying, I didn't really think you were. I just needed to gauge where you are right now. I honestly don't recognize this woman anymore. Just a quick update. I met with my lawyer, and it's genuinely the best I've felt about any aspect of this situation since it started. I'm 99% certain my wife doesn't know about this site, but on the off chance she does, I'll keep the details of my meeting to a minimum. I'm confident I can come out of this with minimal financial damage. These past few days have been incredibly strange. My wife has been treating me exceptionally well, almost like our first months together. She's tried to initiate intimacy twice, but I managed to handle it positively without raising any questions from her. Yesterday, while she was out, I accessed her computer again and noticed that her Word document had been updated with more exchanges between her and the other person. To address some of your questions about the document, it doesn't contain evidence of past sexual exchanges or future meetings. But in many ways, it's worse. They have multiple nicknames for each other, inside jokes, essentially a secret universe that suggests they're deeply infatuated with each other. I'm devastated, but well, it seems I have some serious issues with my judgment. So, I don't need a private detective or more proof. The boys are going to their dad's tomorrow, leaving us a whole week, especially Saturday, to address this. I'll confront her on Saturday without making threats. I'll simply tell her she's free to date this man and do as she pleases with him, but I won't share my wife, etc. Wish me luck. I'll do my best to explain the last 24 hours. Yesterday, my wife dropped our boys off at her ex-husband's place after school. Instead of coming home, she called me to say her ex had asked her to stay for the weekend to help with the boys because he had broken his leg earlier in the week and is quite incapacitated. His wife was away on a business trip until Sunday night. I wasn't bothered by this at all. I understand their relationship and what it is. The issue was more like a nagging feeling, like little spider senses in me, as the hours passed, whispering at me, then practically yelling that she might be lying somehow. Around 6:30 p.m., I playfully texted her, "Send me a photo of you and the boys." She left my message unread until about 8:30 p.m., didn't respond, and only after an hour had passed since reading it, she sent me a random close-up photo of herself that could have been taken anytime, anywhere. At that point, a nauseous feeling overwhelmed me. Around 11 p.m., I couldn't handle it anymore. I drove to her ex's place. Her car wasn't there. Then, I went to her boss's house, about 8 minutes away from her ex's. Her car wasn't there either. His car wasn't visible, but he had a garage, so it could have been inside. I felt a mix of relief and concern. Where was she? Then it hit me. I drove to their hotel. What I saw left me in shock. Her car was in the parking lot, not far from his. I'm ashamed to admit that I sat there and cried for I don't know how long. I'm not usually a crier, so it was a strange feeling. My mind raced with countless thoughts, yet it felt like I wasn't thinking at all. Despite all the preparation from the shared document and this forum, nothing could prepare me for that kind of discovery. I took some photos and even a video. Whatever. I went home and tried to collect myself as best I could. Sleep was impossible. Around 6 a.m., I knew what I had to do. I checked the hotel again to see if the cars were still there. They were. I took more photos and drove to his house. My primary intent was probably to share what I knew with his wife, about 95% of me, and the remaining 5% considered confronting him in front of his wife if he returned to his place. A part of me was open to confronting him. I've never resorted to physical violence in my life, but he seemed like an appropriate place to start. I sat on the edge of his driveway for over an hour, and suddenly, I saw curtains being drawn and lights turning on in his house. Walking up their driveway to the front door felt like one of the bravest things I'd ever done. I knocked, and his wife looked understandably surprised when she answered. However, when she realized it was me, she was warm and asked if everything was okay and why I was there. I told her I needed to talk with her. What gave me further courage was that her reaction to my need to talk made it clear that she already had an inkling of what I was about to share. I won't delve into the details of the whole conversation out of respect for the emotions both she and I were going through in such a short time. But in essence, I saw her go through the initial stages of grief in about 10 minutes: shock, pain, anger, and sadness. I showed her screenshots of this shared Word document, and she believed its authenticity right away because of his writing style and certain affectionate expressions he also used with her. It was tougher to show her the photos of the cars at the hotel, but I had to start with that. She told me he'd informed her on Friday morning that he had to leave for a nearby city for unexpected weekend meetings with top executives. He cleverly claimed he had to stop by the hotel on his way to the airport and leave his car there for the weekend. Why wouldn't he just pick up my wife from her ex's? It dawned on me that the entire story about her ex needing her help for the weekend was probably a total fabrication. She likely dropped her boys off and headed straight to the hotel. That's probably exactly what happened. I feel foolish. How could this woman, who shared my life, lead a double life like that without me knowing? What's so special about this guy that makes him worthy of such a choice? Objectively, I'm arguably better than him in every superficial sense, and definitely better by objective standards. Now, she's going to spend the next few nights at her mother's. She's uncertain about how to proceed. She plans to confront him, but has asked whether I'd feel comfortable confronting my wife first. She intends to gauge her actions based on how that conversation goes. Yesterday, I was ready for the confrontation with my wife, but I've lost the heart for it now. I'm torn between wanting to scream at her for hours or simply never seeing her cheating face again. She just texted me with some silly emojis, saying it's a lazy Saturday where she is. What a fake, deceitful, treacherous person. And what a reckless risk taker. I guess she's counting on the fact that we don't really ask the boys for a debrief on their week at their dad's when we pick them up on Fridays. Still, it's so risky. Imagine being so infatuated with a man that you'd take such risks for him. While I'm prepared to confront her, it's not what my energy and emotions want. I wish to vanish to a remote cabin in the wilderness for a few months and never see my wife again. I'm impressed by all of you who can consider reconciliation in the aftermath of such trauma, but I can't. This is a deal breaker for me, and there's honestly nothing my wife can say to change my mind. I want to expose her and her lover. I also want to erase these two from my thoughts forever. I feel terribly ill about facing my wife. Yesterday morning, I had a clear plan for our conversation, but now I'm a wreck. Sorry for the length and rambling, jumping right in. Early Sunday evening, I heard keys in my front door, and to my shock, it was my wife. It was unexpected as I had already planned two things for the next day, an early visit to my lawyer and a trip up north to a wilderness resort I had always wanted to stay at. I didn't have a set plan for how I would confront her, and I wasn't expecting or wanting it to happen in person. The scene was chaotic. She was on the offensive right from the start, talking a mile a minute to my stunned brain. Here's what seemed to have happened. Late Sunday afternoon, OBW drove to the hotel, asked the front desk to call her husband and tell him his wife was in the lobby waiting to see him. He apparently stuck to his story for a few minutes, then eventually convinced his wife to have their confrontation back at their home. What amazed and disgusted me the most was that my wife waited at the hotel until after Posum and OBW had their confrontation, clearly so that she could gauge what OBW and I knew and get her story as straight as possible. I'm certain she waited because OBW texted me about 30 minutes before my wife came home, saying, sorry. Just couldn't wait. Had to have it out with him. I asked her how it went, and she said he claimed it was all fantasy and that they hadn't even kissed yet. When she questioned him about the overnight stays at the hotel, he said that due to last-minute changes in his special weekend meetings going online, he thought it would be more convenient to stay there. He mentioned that the thrill of their relationship was pushing flirtation to the limit without physical contact. When his wife expressed disbelief and pressed him further, he admitted that the closest they had come to anything inappropriate that weekend was engaging in several self-pleasing sessions in each other's presence, but insisted they hadn't touched. So, to avoid repeating, this was the exact story I heard from my wife on Sunday night, which eerily mirrored everything I had just heard from OBW. It would have been somewhat more credible if my wife had diverged on certain details, but no, the stories were identical. Honestly, the best way to describe how I processed things on Sunday night was that it felt like an out-of-body experience. I felt absolutely no emotion, none at all, as I watched this complete stranger play her role as a shocked-to-be-accused but definitely loyal spouse. After she had delivered her lengthy, clearly rehearsed speech, I quietly rose from the table and left the room. This infuriated her, and she followed me into the bedroom. She put on yet another mask, this time becoming the righteously angry spouse. She claimed that my indifference to her honesty just now was a reflection of my larger indifference throughout our marriage and that her fantasy role play, or whatever it was a natural response to enduring my indifference. At that moment, I couldn't help but start laughing. It wasn't a cool, collected laugh, it was somewhat unhinged. It seemed to unsettle her a bit, which gave me an opening to respond. I proceeded to list off every detail, dating almost back to the day we met, that demonstrated the exact opposite of indifference. In fact, I argued that if I were guilty of anything, it was caring for her too much. She began to cry, plead, and reach out to me, which was far from attractive. She tried to hug and touch me, but I gently pushed her away. In a calm but weary voice, I told her, "You are no longer my wife." Frankly, even if your version of events were entirely true, you were deeply involved in an emotional affair, which is just as unacceptable to me as a physical one. However, I don't believe a word you're saying.